Hello again, Steve here, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about where the loss of freedom really takes place. And I'm going to say here that yes, ostensibly, certainly, and certainly from a broad perspective, it takes place in the world of authoritarians because they always want to control, right? I mean, authoritarians are slave-minded people, after all, because they don't want to produce for themselves. They want to skim off the labor of others, ultimately, right? But where it takes place on a very practical level is in the hearts and minds of each and every one of us. Because the moment we censor ourselves, we have fallen for that. And of course, it's understandable why we would censor ourselves, because it can be downright dangerous to not censor ourselves. So therefore we do. And I'll just give a couple of examples of what I mean by this. Like a few weeks ago, I was in Europe, actually. And in certain parts of Europe, it's actually illegal to talk about certain things. As a matter of fact, there are certain YouTube videos that are, or YouTube channels that are completely banned. I had heard, for example, that Styx Hexenhammer, his YouTube channel is not available in Germany. So I was in Germany and I checked, and sure enough, there's a sign that says the YouTube channel is not available in your country. And then I was in France, same thing. I mean, imagine that. Imagine that somebody is not allowed to talk at all, according to some sort of government regulation in a certain country. Imagine that. Imagine that. Censorship. But what also happens is, because of these regulations, people self-censor. Like, I was at somebody's place and I was on Wi-Fi, and I happened to look up something about the Nazis or something like that. I just happened to, there was a question came up, so let's check it up, you know. And the guy seemed visibly nervous, because I'm not sure, but maybe in that country it's illegal. I don't know. Imagine that. But that's not surprising, because if you remember this guy, David Irving, who was probably the foremost historian, and not discounted as the foremost historian on the Third Reich and the Holocaust. I mean, one of the most quoted researchers, like first-hand researchers, not a researcher who goes and researches other people's research. A guy who went back to the primary sources, who spoke German, who spent many years in Germany interviewing all of Hitler's chief of staff and the whole works. Nobody else has done that. I mean, the foremost researcher on it. But like, how many years did he spend in jail? He wasn't allowed to talk about what he talked about. And these are the sorts of things that really reduce our freedoms, is when we begin to self-censor. We go, oh, there's an example. That's that guy over there. He wasn't allowed to talk, so I'm not going to talk about this. Right? I was talking to a family member of mine not that long ago about this sort of thing. And this is a very, very intelligent guy, but he was of the mind that, yeah, you shouldn't talk about things. And I was like, and he thought that he had me cornered when he said, well, you wouldn't talk about this, would you? I said, I'll talk about anything. I don't agree, and I certainly don't agree that you shouldn't talk about this. So freedom of speech is incredibly important. Of course, freedom of thought is incredibly important. But the minute we're not allowed to talk about things, and we fall for that, and many people agree with the same idea, that's when freedoms are curtailed. Because thoughts lead to our words, right, which lead to our actions. And if we're going to curtail what we say, we're going to also curtail what we do. So I guess the point of this is just an acknowledgement of that, an acknowledgement of where freedom is really lost. It's lost in the hearts and minds and in the words of people, which then spreads to many people. And to acknowledge this, then the road to freedom, the road to more freedom, is the speaking up and the sort of defiance, if you will, of these religious dictates that humanity has found themselves in for forever, probably. You can talk about this, but you can't talk about that. I say, be damned with what others say we can't talk about. We're talking about it. We're talking about it. And there's no measurable harm that I know of that can come from, especially when you're talking about reasonable people, just discussing things. Yes, we can harm things through gossip and slandering people and so on, but just talking about ideas and questioning the mainstream narrative, I don't see a problem with that. That, to me, is the road to freedom. Steve here, great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. We'll talk again soon. Bye for now.